they finally killed it. The last thing they did before they killed it, they came up with another brilliant idea. Let's change names. So along came the G6 to replace the Grand Am, the G5 to replace the Sunbird, and the G3 to replace that incredible thing that Chevrolet makes called the Aveo, which I'm not sure too many of you even know about. I don't blame you. I don't want to know anything more about it. A little Daewoo. And then, of course, came the magnificent G8. An incredible step in the right direction, the big brother of the GTO. This is what the GTO would have evolved into because it comes off of the next generation Holden Commodore, which is where the first GTO came from. Unfortunately, along with the G8 and along with Pontiac. Now let's talk a few minutes about why Pontiac and not Buick. Because I know that's a question I'm going to be asked. Well, you've heard this story. I'm going to tell it to you from an absolute, factual point of view. In 2009, which was not a particularly good year, one of the worst years, Pontiac sold 450,000 cars, Buick sold 250,000. So you might say, well, what the hell? Why not a Pontiac? If they're selling that many cars, why get rid of them? Of a great success like Pontiac in favor of a car called Buick. Well, let's adjust a couple of serious things. Pontiac sales were 40% fleet. Now, what do I mean by fleet? Well, the biggest percentage of fleet, in fact, over 70% of fleet are daily rentals. And unfortunately, as we have all come to know, that's kind of the kiss of death. Because when you're a daily rental car, that's what you rent, you beat up and you don't care about. But when you're driving something that's your own personal, you don't want a piece of junk like that you rented last week in Saginaw when you went to Memphis for a business trip. And as a result, Pontiac really only had 270,000 honest, what we call retail sales. So it was really almost an equal footing. Well, then you add the fact that there's a new market. I'll call it China, but it's really the emerging markets all over the world. Let's zero in on China. When General Motors went into China, they researched. And to their credit, they did a damn good job. And they found out that the name Buick really had some serious momentum in China. And I'm talking about going back, literally decades. Back in the 20s, for example, when there were emperors over there, the emperor had a fleet of 1927 Buick touring cars. They were dark green, four-door convertible sedans. And they used to tour the countryside in these big Buick limousines. And Buick had become known as a real serious kind of a step-up, luxury, well-respected nameplate. And consequently, that had carried over. This was long before the communist regime, long before any of the changes in government. Buick had a name, had a place. Then, right after the new millennium, 2002, GM hooked up with an outfit called Shanghai Automotive. You have to do that in order to sell a car in China. You have to have a partner, a 50-50% partner. GM's partner was Shanghai Automotive. And they built a couple of factories in China to allow Shanghai Automotive, with General Motors' help, to build some cars. And those cars were Buicks. And one of the cars they built over there was a car we know as the Buick Regal, which is the mid-size Buick. Not the new one that's coming. It was the same size as the Grand Prix or the G8 is today, a mid-size sedan. GM talked the Chinese government into buying 5,000 of those Buick Regals. They were all black, they all had leather interiors, and they had partitions in them. And they were chauffeured through. And they picked right up from that old image that had existed for years. All of the Chinese government officials were chauffeured around, no matter where in the provinces they went, in these real pretty little mid-sized black Buick limousines. And that made a tremendous statement. for a car called Buick. Then they introduced a car, you guys all and gals all remember the Geo Metro, which we had in this country. Well, they introduced that very same car in China. It was called the Buick Sail, S-A-I-L, and it sold pretty well. So Buick, frankly, is a significant success in China. And consequently, they feared, and with good reason, that if they killed the make in the U.S., that would seriously compromise it in China. And therefore, that was why the decision was made. We can lose Pontiac. We would rather lose Pontiac than Buick, because Buick has a future. Maybe not in Flint, maybe not in Wichita, but in China. And that was a worthwhile reason to preserve it. This is a little cartoon that I picked up that I'd like to share with you, as sad as it is, as pathetic as it is. But unfortunately, that could happen. And isn't that a shame? So I gotta say, it's up to us. Now I'm gonna do a little rah-rah before I get out of your face. There ain't no more Pontiac. We're lucky there's even a General Motors. But there isn't. Pontiac is too much a part of America. Now, I'm not waving my flag, I'm just telling you the truth. It's too much a part of American heritage. The Pontiac image, the Pontiac way, that's the U.S., that's the good old U.S. And it's really, in a sense, going to be up to us to keep that thing alive. And we are doing a damn good job. We just have to keep on doing it. Because the Pontiac image is every bit as exciting and every bit as rewarding as looking at a new Pontiac, which had evolved into a pretty dumb cars. And so what I say to you in closing, by God, let's keep it alive. This Pontiac thing has got to survive. And we're the folks that are going to do it. And with that, I want to certainly thank you for being a wonderful audience, magnificent. I can't tell you how much I enjoy screaming at you. But I'm emotional about it. I'm pissed, and you should be too. And with that, I say thank you. If there are any questions, and I think I've thrown some stuff out of my group, but if there are any questions, I would certainly be happy to field. Yes, sir.
Jim, quick question. GM refused to sell Pontiac 8, unlike the Saturn and the Hummer. What can we read into that decision, that they're holding the Pontiac 8 close to the best, and they have plans for the future, maybe the resurrection as a niche brand?
Damn good question. I'm sorry to have to answer it so ugly. But the reality is they ain't got nothing. They got a name. They don't really have a car. There was nothing they built that wasn't shared by any other GM division. They were bringing in an awfully nice car from Australia, the G8. But that could be changed. The name could change, and that could be sold through a Chevrolet or a Buick dealer. They had nothing except a nameplate and a fairly good dealer body. And it didn't take very much to get rid of most of that dealer body. So they really didn't have anything to say. Yeah, they own it. Yeah, but I don't even want to say it that way. I'm going to say no. It's more unlikely that it will ever come back than I have any right to inspire any hope that it might. And I'm not speaking for General Motors. Believe me, I'm not on the inside. I'm a good observer. And in the near future, I just cannot see any place for Pontiac in the future. In the U.S. market. Anybody else?
Jim, this is a little bit off topic, but what do you think of that memo that came out of GM's advertising group to not call Chevys a Chevy.
Well, that's about as funny as it is to even discuss it. You know, and that shows you what happens when you get little boys in men's jobs. Which is exactly what I have been talking about for the last hour. You know, yeah, they meant well. They were talking about some activity that they got planned for Europe, where they're trying to bring the name Chevrolet to mean something. You know, they've been, quite frankly, they've been fooling around over in Europe with this Opel thing for so long. It has modest little successes and huge failures. It's as unpopular in some parts as it is popular. So they have made the decision that maybe their world car, and particularly in Europe, ought to be a car called Chevrolet. And that led to the decision, well, if we're going to try to promote Chevrolet, we really ought to kind of call it Chevrolet. And maybe we ought to not confuse people and call it Chevy. Well, that's fine in France, you know, or Germany, or Italy, or Yugoslavia, or wherever else, but it sure doesn't work in Chicago, or Los Angeles, or Wichita. And they quickly realized that. Very red-faced, they had to quickly absorb it, because it's funny. It's so pathetic, it's funny. But that's, you know, what happened. And again, it's a case of, you know, let's call it bad PR. Should never have ever gotten out. But I appreciate the opportunity to at least discuss it, as silly as it is. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
We have GTOs, but we also have 1958 Pontiacs. And my question is, in 1958, they used the Star Chief as the 50th anniversary car. And in our estimation, we have a hardtop, the Bonneville hardtop. And we're wondering why, I mean, that was the first real year for production for the Bonneville. Why did they not, would we know, why wouldn't they have used that Bonneville hardtop for the 50th anniversary car rather than the Star Chief? The Star Chief was a four-door post, and the Bonneville was such a beautiful, you know, two-door, just such so much more of a sporty car. My husband and I have always wondered why they didn't use that as the anniversary car for their car.
Well, all I can say to you is yes. I completely agree with you that 1958 Bonneville was just a magnificent car. Unfortunately, it was what we call a kind of a rollover car. If you remember back in 1958, it was a one-year car. It was shared, the body architecture was shared with Chevrolet. It was the first production Impala, coupe, and convertible. Pontiac called theirs the Bonneville. And then in 1959, when the all-new car came, then they took the name Bonneville and elevated it to what we were talking about earlier today, a high-level, most expensive, most sought-after Pontiac. And that was what the Bonneville image really became. Now, why they didn't necessarily recognize that 58 Bonneville on the occasion of that anniversary, I really don't have an answer, except that it had to be a decision made by somebody who didn't know. One more time, that didn't understand. That wasn't, as you know, the first production Bonneville. The car actually came out in 1957 as a convertible.
It was just a very small production by comparison, wasn't it?
Yes, they were very, very light. They were a very special car, but they did get some good press.
Yeah.
In fact, the 58 car was almost the same way, except that they released it as a hardtop and therefore picked up some more volume. And the 58 Bonneville, you don't need me to tell you, is today a pretty damn good collectible. They do have some significant value. Unfortunately, there was a huge number of them built in 1958 with a fuel injection system. And every one of them didn't work. Well, they were all recalled. Most of them were replaced with a tri-power application, but that hasn't affected their value. If you can find one today that's got that fuel injection on it, it's worth a fortune.
Like that at the 3.2 barrels.
But I can't disagree with you. The 58 Bonneville was a wonderful car. And why it didn't get more recognition, I'm not sure I can defend.
Yeah, well, we've always wondered about that. It just seemed, again, to us anyway, like a marketing mistake.
And more power to you.
Such an opportunity.
It's a great collector.
Thank you.
Maybe one more.
Yes, sir.
Will you be around for the rest of the convention?
Yes, I'll be here right through Sunday.
We're right across from the GTOAA booth as you walk into the convention center, right next to the magazine subscription setup. So we're right there in the corner, and we've got Jim's books, Glory Days that recounts all of his time, and some other merchandise.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, the drag strip.
Jim, I was wondering if the 2005 GTO would have been the first one instead of the 04. Do you think that GTO would have had a better reception in the market and sold better?
No, I'd like to say that, but I have to tell you no. The car, unfortunately, gained its image almost immediately. The big question from anybody that wanted to like the car was why the dated style. And in those days, you know, even if you were an insider, even if you were an automotive-oriented guy, like almost all of us are, we love it, we're part of it. You don't understand that you don't just say, let's build a new car. You know, that's a 5-year project at best. Now they picked this car up from Holden, where it had been in the marketplace for 4 years already, and did a couple of things, a couple of stupid things, a couple of good things, but they readied it for the U.S. market. So it didn't lack performance, and the fact that they went from a 5.7 to a 6.0 in 05, that would not have made a difference. There were really two very significant things, and I'll take a couple of seconds before finally, that killed that car. One was their absolute determination not to recognize it for what it really was. And what can a GTO ever be? A muscle car. And who was going to buy it? The people that have got them now and love them, and spend all their money on them, and worship them. They ignored it. Even worse than that, they did the most incredibly unprofessional training job on that car with their own organization. The average salesman, even the dealers, even the managers, because they knew it was going to be modest volume, didn't spend very much time learning about the car. All right, let's just use as an example. Let's say you're a guy 55, 60 years old, you owned a 66 or 67 Goat, had a ton of fun with it, you remember it. Now you're driving a 3 Series or a 5 Series BMW. You got all the money that you need, you're comfortable, and all of a sudden you read about this new car called GTO, and it got some wonderful press. So you decided, you know, maybe I'll stop off one Saturday afternoon and take a look at it, see if it's as good as the Motor Trend said, or if it's as good a car as it kind of looks. You walked into the dealership and said, gee, I'd like to look at one of these new GTOs, and the salesman would point to one on the floor. They had put $1,000 worth of aftermarket cheap wheels on it and some tape stripe on it, and said, there it is. You can have it, we can have it ready for you in 2 hours, and it's only $40,000. The sticker on it was $33,000 at the dealer, and I would have done the same thing if I was a dealer, had marked it up. But he didn't know when he was going to get his next one. Then you said, well, okay, I'm interested in it. Could I drive one? Is there one around that I could use? And they said, we don't have any demos. We can't demo a car like this. There isn't enough of them. And that was the most critical mistake. When they got people in that showroom, wanted to drive the car, and they didn't have a car for them. And that's not the dealer's fault, that's the factory's fault. That's a program that the factory should put in, and every dealer had to have a demo. When somebody came in and said, I want to drive it, by God, there it is. Take it out. And it should have been a 6-speed, it should have been in beautiful shape, and it should have really been what it was capable of doing. It should have been able to beat somebody, and it did. Well, that's the kind of stuff they didn't do. In addition to not wanting to recognize it as a muscle car, not wanting to recognize the people that loved it, They snubbed you, they turned their back on you. When they came to the conventions, they talked down to you. I was embarrassed for them. They were that uninformed. So that's really what killed that car. And I don't think another model here, when they got the exhaust right, they got some good
hoods.
seats on it. That didn't work. Well, one more
Thanks,
time, thank you.